My name is Amanda, and I was supposed to be the maid of honor at my sister Jessica's wedding. That was the plan from the beginning. Ever since we were kids, we talked about our weddings, how we'd be there for each other, standing side by side, supporting one another like we always had. We grew up on a farm in Tennessee, raised by hardworking parents who taught us the value of family, loyalty, and sacrifice. But somewhere along the way, Jessica changed. She moved to the city, surrounded herself with new people, and became obsessed with appearances. She no longer cared about the simple values we were raised with. At first, I thought it was just a phase. People change, right? But I never imagined that when the biggest day of her life arrived, she'd decide that I wasn't good enough to be part of it. A week before the wedding, she sat me down with a forced smile and said, "Amanda, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I don't think you should be in the wedding anymore." I blinked. "What?" She sighed, shifting uncomfortably. "I just feel like your style doesn't fit the aesthetic we're going for. You know, the whole elegant, sophisticated look." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "My style? What are you talking about?" Jessica pursed her lips. "Look, you're a great person. You're kind and hardworking, and I love that about you. But you're too country. Your accent, your boots, the way you carry yourself, it's not the image we want. This is a high-class wedding, and I need everything to be perfect." I felt my heart sink. "So you're saying I'm embarrassing?" She hesitated. "I wouldn't put it that way, but I just don't think you fit in with the rest of the bridal party. It's nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" My own sister was cutting me from her wedding because I wasn't fancy enough? Because I wasn't ashamed of who I was? I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to nod. "All right, Jessica, if that's how you feel." She smiled, relieved that I wasn't making a scene. "I knew you'd understand. But you can still come as a guest. You'll have a great time." I didn't respond. I just stood up and walked out of her house, feeling something inside me break. What she didn't know was that I had invested a lot into her wedding. A lot more than she realized. And if I wasn't good enough to stand beside her, then maybe my investment wasn't good enough either. I drove back home, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't just hurt, I was angry. Jessica had become someone I barely recognized. She had forgotten where she came from. But if she thought she could treat me like this and still get everything she wanted, she was in for a surprise. Because without me, there wasn't going to be a wedding. A few months before, when Jessica first started planning, she called me in a panic about how expensive everything was. The venue, the catering, the dress, she wanted it all to be perfect, but her budget didn't match her expectations. That's when I stepped in. I had worked hard my whole life, saving every penny I could. I wasn't rich, but I had enough put away. When Jessica asked for help, I didn't hesitate. I offered to pay for the catering, $15,000 upfront. She cried, hugged me, and promised she'd never forget what I did for her. Turns out that promise didn't mean much. As I sat in my truck, replaying our conversation in my head, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. "Amanda, honey, Jessica just told me about the wedding change. Are you okay?" I took a deep breath. "I'm fine, Mom." She hesitated. "I know this hurts, but she's just stressed. You know how she gets when she wants things to be perfect." "That doesn't make it right," I said quietly. "I know," she admitted, "but don't do anything drastic. It's still her big day." I didn't answer, because the truth was, I had already made up my mind. That night, I went through my emails and pulled up the contract with the catering company. Since I was the one who had paid, my name was on the agreement. And according to the cancellation policy, I had every right to pull out as long as I did it a week in advance. Which, as luck would have it, was exactly where we were. I clicked the cancellation button, confirmed the refund to my account, and sat back in my chair. Jessica wanted a perfect wedding? Well, let's see how perfect it is without food. The next morning, I went about my day, as usual. Feeding the animals, checking the crops, fixing a broken fence. It was a nice distraction from everything. But around noon, my phone started blowing up. First, a text from Jessica. "Jessica, what did you do? Then a call from her fiancé, Ryan. Then another from my mom. I ignored them all, letting the messages pile up. I knew exactly what had happened. Jessica had found out. By the time the sun was setting, my mom showed up at my house, looking exasperated. Amanda, please tell me you didn't cancel the catering. I crossed my arms. Jessica didn't want me in her wedding, so I figured she wouldn't want my money in it either. Mom groaned, rubbing her temples. Sweetheart, do you realize what you've done? The wedding is in 5 days. She has over 200 guests coming. There's no time to find another caterer. I shrugged. Not my problem. Mom let out a frustrated sigh. Amanda, you know I raised you to be better than this. That one stung. But I stood my ground.
No, Mom.
You raised me to be kind, to be loyal, and to stand up for myself. Jessica didn't care about my kindness when she cut me out of her wedding. So, why should I care about hers? Mom didn't have an answer for that. She just shook her head and left, probably to go deal with Jessica's meltdown. I watched her car disappear down the road, then turned back to my house. I had no regrets, but I had a feeling this was far from over. And I was right, because the next day, something happened that I never expected. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. I groggily reached for it, expecting another round of angry messages from Jessica, but when I looked at the screen, my heart nearly stopped. 50 missed calls. Not just from Jessica. From Mom. From Ryan. From numbers I didn't even recognize. And the texts, dozens of them. Some from family members, some from Jessica's friends, and even one from the wedding planner. I rubbed my eyes and opened the most recent message. It was from Jessica. Jessica, you have ruined everything. I hope you're happy. I frowned, scrolling up to see what else she had said. Jessica, do you even realize what you've done? Jessica, the caterer was the only company available in our budget. We called every other caterer in town, and they're either fully booked or way too expensive. Jessica, what are we supposed to do now? Serve our guests McDonald's? I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. I had expected Jessica to be mad. I had expected yelling, insults, maybe even tears. But I hadn't expected complete and utter panic. Still, I reminded myself why I did this in the first place. I wasn't trying to destroy her wedding. I was standing up for myself. She had made it clear I wasn't good enough to be part of her perfect day. Why should my money be? As I scrolled through the messages, another one caught my eye. This one was from Ryan. Ryan, Amanda, can we please talk? This is getting out of hand. I hesitated. Ryan had always been a decent guy. Out of everyone, he was the only one who never treated me differently, even after Jessica started acting high and mighty. I decided to call him back. He answered on the first ring. Amanda. Thank God. I sighed. What do you want, Ryan? He exhaled sharply. Look, I know you're mad at Jessica. And honestly, she handled things terribly. But canceling the catering? That's extreme, don't you think? I said nothing. Listen, he continued, his voice calmer, almost pleading. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm not even asking you to be in the wedding. I just need you to understand that we're in trouble here. We have 200 guests expecting a full-course meal. If we don't find a solution, we're going to have to cut the guest list in half or... He stopped, hesitating. Or what? I pressed. Ryan sighed. Or cancel the whole thing. I blinked. Wait. You're saying that without catering, the entire wedding is off. It's not just that, he admitted. Between the venue costs, the decor, and everything else, we're stretched thin. The catering was already pushing our budget, but it was a necessity. Now that it's gone, we don't know what to do. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mixture of emotions swirl inside me. A part of me felt a small twinge of guilt, but another part, the part that remembered Jessica's words, her dismissive tone, her cold smile, knew that this was her own doing. Ryan, I said slowly, I love you, and I think you're a great guy. But Jessica made her choice. She decided I wasn't good enough for her wedding. Well, I'm not good enough to pay for it either. Ryan didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. I understand. And then he hung up. I stared at my phone for a moment, feeling a strange weight settle in my chest. But before I could process it, another text came through. Mom, Amanda, you need to come over.
Now.
I frowned. Now what? When I arrived at my parents' house, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jessica was pacing in the living room, her face red and blotchy from crying. Mom stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, looking at me like I had just set the whole town on fire. Dad was the only one who seemed neutral, sitting in his recliner with a tired expression. Jessica whirled around the second I stepped inside. How could you do this to me? I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. You didn't want me in your wedding, Jessica. So, I figured you wouldn't want my money in it either. Her face twisted in fury. That is not the same thing. Oh, it's not. I crossed my arms. You told me I wasn't elegant enough, that I didn't fit your aesthetic. You basically called me an embarrassment. But my money? That was good enough for you, huh? Jessica threw her hands in the air. I was stressed, Amanda. Weddings are complicated. I just wanted everything to be perfect. I scoffed. And perfect meant getting rid of me? She hesitated, looking away. I didn't mean it like that. Mom sighed. Amanda, honey, I know you're hurt, but you have to understand, this wedding means everything to Jessica. And I didn't mean anything to her? I shot back. Jessica's lip trembled, but she didn't deny it. Silence filled the room. Dad let out a long breath and finally spoke up. Jessica, he said, I think you owe your sister an apology. Jessica's jaw clenched. Dad, this is my wedding. And Amanda is your sister.
She didn't respond.
I shook my head. You know what? Forget it. I'm done. I turned to leave, but Mom grabbed my arm. Amanda, please, she begged. There has to be another way. I met her eyes. If Jessica can look me in the face and tell me that I'm nothing but an embarrassment to her, then maybe I'll think about it. I turned to my sister. Go ahead, Jess. Say it. Jessica's lips parted, but no words came out. Her face crumbled, and for the first time since this all started, I saw something real in her expression. Not just anger, not just panic, regret. But before she could say anything, a loud crash sounded from outside. We all jumped. Dad bolted to the window, peering through the blinds. Then his eyes widened. Good Lord, he muttered. I rushed over and looked outside. My stomach dropped. Jessica's wedding venue, the fancy garden setup she had spent months perfecting, was completely destroyed. The wind had knocked over the floral arrangements, chairs were scattered everywhere, and the giant reception tent had collapsed. Jessica gasped, running past me and out the door.
No.
No, no, no. She sprinted toward the wreckage, hands in her hair, her screams piercing the air. And as I watched her fall to her knees in the middle of the mess, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. Jessica's perfect wedding wasn't just falling apart. It was completely unraveling. Jessica was sobbing in the middle of the wreckage. Flowers were crushed, tables flipped over, and the elegant reception tent that was supposed to house her dream wedding now lay in a twisted heap of fabric and metal poles. Mom and Dad ran after her, trying to console her, but she wasn't hearing any of it. No, 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 she wailed, grabbing at the fallen decorations as if she could somehow piece them back together. This can't be happening. I stood frozen on the porch, watching the chaos unfold. A part of me still felt the sting of her betrayal, but another part of me couldn't ignore the absolute devastation on her face. I took a step forward, then stopped myself. This isn't your problem anymore, Amanda. Let her figure it out. But then Ryan showed up. His car skidded to a stop in the driveway, and he jumped out before the engine had even fully shut off. His eyes darted between the wreckage and Jessica, and I saw his face pale. What the hell happened? He demanded. Jessica turned to him, her mascara streaking down her face. A storm, she stammered. The wind knocked everything down. The venue is ruined. Ryan ran a hand down his face, exhaling sharply. Oh my God. This can't be happening. I don't know what to do, Jessica sobbed, clinging to him. Everything is falling apart, Ryan. First the catering, now this? How are we supposed to have a wedding? Ryan didn't answer. He just closed his eyes and shook his head. I felt an uneasy stir in my chest. This is bad. A part of me wanted to turn around, go back inside, and let Jessica deal with the mess she created. But another part, the part that remembered the little girl who used to braid my hair, who used to sneak into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to tell me I was her best friend, felt something close to pity. I took a slow breath. And then, before I could stop myself, I stepped forward. Jessica, I said quietly. She looked up at me, her tear-streaked face filled with misery. I sighed. I have an idea. 30 minutes later, we were all sitting around the dining room table. Jessica was still sniffling, Ryan had his head in his hands, and Mom and Dad looked somewhere between exhausted and relieved that I hadn't completely abandoned my sister. I took a deep breath and said the words I never thought I would say after everything that had happened. I'll help you fix this. Jessica lifted her head, eyes wide with disbelief. What? I swallowed my pride. I know you want a fancy wedding, but that's not going to happen anymore. The venue is wrecked, and even if we find another one, you won't be able to afford it. You need a new plan. And fast. Ryan nodded. She's right. We're running out of options. Jessica chewed her lip. But what can we do? I hesitated, then finally said, we have a barn. Jessica's face twisted. A barn. I fought back a sigh. Yes, a barn. It's big enough for a wedding, and we can clean it up, decorate it, make it something special. It won't be your dream venue, but at least it's something. Jessica's expression shifted, torn between hope and horror. But it's so rustic. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, you mean it's too country? Her face turned red. Ryan, on the other hand, looked hopeful. That could actually work. He turned to Jessica. Babe, I know it's not what you pictured, but at this point, do we really have a choice? Jessica looked between us, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. She was struggling. I could see it in her face. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. Okay, let's do it. And just like that, the plan was set. But I had no idea that agreeing to help would lead to an even bigger disaster. The next morning, I got up before the sun, pulled on my boots, and headed to the barn. If we were going to turn this place into a wedding venue, we had a lot of work to do. The barn was old, not falling apart, but definitely not what Jessica would consider elegant. Dust covered every surface, hay bales were stacked in the corners, and the smell of animals still lingered in the air. But with the right decorations, some lights, and a little elbow grease, I knew it could be beautiful. Ryan and Dad arrived first, followed by Mom. Jessica, of course, showed up last, looking around with barely contained disappointment. Are you sure this can work? She asked, wrinkling her nose. I rolled my eyes. Not if you just stand there complaining. Grab a broom.
To my surprise, she did.
And for the next few hours, we worked. We cleared out the hay, swept the floors, and wiped down every wooden surface until the place looked almost new. Mom hung white drapes along the walls, while Ryan and Dad started stringing up fairy lights across the ceiling. I had to admit, it was starting to come together. Jessica, for once, was actually helping. She arranged tables, picked out flowers from Mom's garden, and even borrowed some antique chairs from a neighbor. It was the first time in years that we worked together like sisters, and for a brief moment I thought maybe, just maybe, this whole thing would bring us closer. But then, disaster struck. It started with a phone call. Jessica was outside, taking a break when she answered her phone. I wasn't paying attention at first. I was too busy helping Ryan hang decorations. But then I heard her scream. What do you mean he canceled? Every muscle in my body tensed. I turned around just in time to see Jessica pacing furiously, phone clutched to her ear.
No.
You don't understand. We need that DJ, she yelled. You can't just hello. Hello. She lowered the phone slowly, her face going pale. Ryan stepped forward. Babe, what happened? Jessica's hands shook. The DJ. He canceled. Silence fell over the barn. Ryan frowned. Okay, that's bad. but it's not the end of the world. We can find someone else. Jessica's eyes snapped to him, wild with panic. The wedding is tomorrow, Ryan. Every decent DJ is already booked. What are we supposed to do? Just play music from a freaking iPhone. She was spiraling. Her face was red, her breathing sharp and uneven. Mom rushed over. Sweetheart, calm down. We'll figure something out. But Jessica wasn't listening. She turned her panic on me. This is your fault, she snapped. If you hadn't canceled the catering, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't have had to move the wedding, and the DJ wouldn't have backed out. I froze. Excuse me? You ruined everything, she seethed, stepping closer. You wanted revenge, right? Well, congratulations, Amanda. You got what you wanted. My wedding is a complete disaster.
I felt something inside me snap.
You think this is my fault, I said, my voice low and steady. You really think that after the way you treated me, and the reason everything is going wrong? Jessica opened her mouth, but I cut her off. You want to know the truth, Jess? You did this to yourself, I said coldly. You threw me away like I didn't matter. You decided that I wasn't good enough for your wedding, but my money was. Well, look around. I took my money back, and now you're left with what you deserve, nothing. Jessica's face twisted and hurt, but I didn't care. Figure it out, I said, turning away. I'm done. And for the first time, I meant it. I walked out of the barn, leaving my sister standing in the ruins of her perfect day. And as I reached my truck, one thought filled my mind. This wedding? It's never going to happen. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded with a mix of anger, frustration, and something else, something that felt like finality. I had spent my whole life putting up with Jessica's selfishness, biting my tongue, swallowing my pride, being the bigger person. But this was the last straw. She had called me an embarrassment. She had kicked me out of her wedding. She had expected me to pay for it anyway. And now, after all that, she had the nerve to blame me for her wedding falling apart?
No.
I was done. I parked my truck in the driveway and stormed inside. I needed to cool off, to be alone, to remind myself that I had made the right decision. But before I could even sit down, my phone buzzed.
Mom.
I groaned.
Not now.
I let it ring. Then, a minute later, another call. Then another. Then another. And then, finally, a text popped up that made my stomach drop. Mom, Jessica is in trouble. Please come back. I stared at the message, my pulse hammering in my ears. What now? I grabbed my keys and rushed back to the barn. When I arrived, I found Jessica sitting outside on the barn steps, her head in her hands. Mom and Dad stood nearby, looking helpless. Ryan was pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. What happened? I demanded, out of breath. Ryan stopped pacing and looked at me, his face tight with worry. The venue just called. They're keeping the deposit. I blinked. What? They're not refunding us, he said, his jaw clenching. That was half our wedding budget. Between that, the catering, and the new decorations for the barn, we have nothing left. I swallowed hard. So? Ryan exhaled sharply. So, there's no wedding. We can't afford it. Silence fell over the group. Jessica didn't move. She just sat there, staring at the ground. I took a slow breath, expecting her to explode.
To yell.
To blame me. But she didn't. Instead, she let out a quiet, broken whisper. It's over. Mom knelt beside her, rubbing her back. Oh, honey. Jessica sniffled, but didn't cry. I spent so much time trying to make this perfect, she said softly. I wanted the wedding to be beautiful, to be something people would remember. But all I did was ruin everything. I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, Jessica wasn't acting entitled. She wasn't blaming anyone else. She was just defeated. And that's when I made a decision. A decision I never thought I'd make. I stepped forward, clearing my throat. Jessica. She looked up, her eyes hollow. What? I crossed my arms. You said you wanted a wedding people would remember, right? She hesitated, then nodded. Then let's do it. Right here.
Right now.
Everyone froze. Ryan frowned. What are you talking about? I shrugged. You don't need a fancy venue. You don't need a DJ. You don't need any of that. You've got family. You've got a barn full of decorations. You've got people who love you. Jessica stared at me. But. No buts, I said firmly. You want to get married, right? She nodded slowly. Then let's make it happen. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Ryan let out a laugh. A real, relieved laugh. I mean, why not? He said. We've already got everything we need. All that's missing is the ceremony. Mom clapped her hands. Oh, I love this idea. Dad grinned. We can make it work.
I'll get my old speaker system.
Amanda, you still have that playlist you made for our last family reunion? I nodded. Yeah. Perfect. Jessica's lip trembled. But my dress is still at the tailor's. I'll go get it, Mom offered. Jessica swallowed hard. And the food? Ryan smiled. I'm pretty sure everyone here would be just fine with barbecue and beer. A small, hesitant smile broke across Jessica's face. Okay. And just like that, the wedding was back on. The next few hours were a blur of chaos and last-minute preparations. Neighbors pitched in, bringing food and chairs. Dad set up the speaker system, while Mom ran to get Jessica's dress. Ryan's friends threw together makeshift decorations using whatever we had left. And me? I stood back and watched as my sister's dream wedding came to life in the most unexpected way. By sunset, everything was ready. Jessica stood in the doorway of the barn, looking stunning in her wedding dress. The fairy lights twinkled above us. The makeshift aisle was lined with candles. The guests, who had been frantically invited last minute, were all seated, buzzing with excitement. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. And when Jessica walked down the aisle, toward a man who truly loved her, toward a future that had nothing to do with fancy venues or expensive decorations, I finally understood something. She had spent so much time chasing perfection that she had forgotten what really mattered.
Love. Family.
The people who stood by you no matter what. As she and Ryan said their vows, I felt a lump rise in my throat. And when they kissed, sealing their marriage, I couldn't help but smile. Because in the end, despite everything, the wedding didn't fail. It just turned out differently than planned. And for the first time, that was enough.